Well, let's start this hour then with discussions for net zero plans to be rolled back again. The Times is reporting today that the Prime Minister is going to water down the target when cars running on petrol and diesel should be phased out to be replaced by electric cars. Keir Starmer reinstated the 2030 target after the ban was put back to 2035 by Rishi Sunak. Joining us on the programme now is Dr. Andy Palmer, the former CEO of Aston Martin and COO of Nissan, where he launched Nissan's first electric vehicle, the Nissan Leaf. Andy, good morning.
Good morning.
From your memory, how many times have the goalposts shifted on EV car sales?
I've lost count. And that's that's one of the three major problems in this discussion. We used to be, if you were an inward investor into the United Kingdom, you could rely on the UK to have great law, great educated people, obviously English language, but most of all consistency and reliability. And with all the flick-flacking, the U-turns that we've seen on this policy over the last few years, most OEMs have lost patience and lost trust in the UK government and the UK as an investment source.
Yeah, just to give everyone the history here, so under Theresa May's government, as part of the air quality plan, the UK committed to banning sales of new pure petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2040. Since then, as you well know, Andy, that date has shifted and moved again. It was supposed to be 2030 to be more ambitious, and it looks like an admission from the Energy Secretary and the Prime Minister that was too ambitious. It's going to have to be scaled back again. What is the impact then on EV car producers when the timeline changes so frequently?
Well, it's not just the car producers. Obviously, a car typically costs about $1 billion to develop, and the difference of 5 years delaying or pulling forward by 5 years for every single car you're developing, it has a big impact on the cash flow. But as I say, it's not just the car makers, the infrastructure makers, those people that are responsible for charging points, they have to plan in when they're deploying. And if the deployment is less than they planned, obviously that means they've got redundant chargers sitting out there. So it's the point about EV is not just about the car; it's about the infrastructure it supports, and that's a big problem. And yes, there is an automotive lobby, particularly those automakers that have been slow to move to EVs, and they're lobbying hard to get a delay so that they can catch up. But it's impacting on those that were moving more quickly and those infrastructure providers.
So the current law is that by 2030, so less than 4 years away, only 20% of those new vehicles will be able to use fossil fuels. How realistic is that? Well,
also we must look carefully at what the regulation does. So this year, for example, the intention is that the EV percentage becomes 33% of new cars. And what you'll hear from the lobby is that we're only achieving 27 to 28%, which is true. But there are many flexibilities within the legislation. And the reality is that 2 years ago, the car industry met its Z target. 1 year ago or so, and this year, even at 27%, it will meet its targets because it uses those flexibilities. And the reality is that there are sufficient flexibility within the legislation to allow the car makers to meet their requirements, yet move towards the overall requirement, which is essentially to delete petrol engines and move more persuasively to plug-in vehicles from 2030 and pure electric vehicles from 2035.
Yeah, and do you think that's actually possible, that timeline?
We can see it happening in other countries like Norway and places like China. The reality is that we'll move in that direction, not necessarily because of the legislation, but because of that will be the persuasive technology.
Yes, OK, but do you think the public have been properly persuaded on the merits of net zero?
No, absolutely not. And I think the problem with the Z mandate is it's forcing a technology on people that people aren't necessarily understanding and aren't necessarily ready for. The reality is that an electric car now costs about the same price as an internal combustion engine. They're about on par. Yet an electric car is much cheaper to run. So coming back to the so-called logic of this change, that for the cost of living, an electric car is going to be much cheaper to run, particularly if you're lucky enough to have off-road parking so that you can charge at home. For those that don't have off-road charging...
Or wealthy enough to have off-road parking as well.
Indeed. You'd be better off as a government looking at how you take that off fast charging, for example, because as you know, there's a difference between the VAT applied to home charging and the VAT applied to public fast charging, which is not fair. But basically, I think the story of the electric car is it significantly reduces your household bill and doesn't cost you anything more to buy.
It's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you very much. Before I let you go, Andy, I don't know if you were listening to our conversation in the last sort of 20 minutes or so. The Times looked at the regions across the UK where we've got a 20 mile per hour speed limit. You clearly have some significant skin in the game in the pleasure of driving and what we all get from our cars. Do you think it's excessive?
I think 20 mile an hour limits around schools, around hospitals and around vulnerable people is very sensible because the impact of a car on a person grows, the injury grows terrifically with every 1 mile an hour that you add. I think it's wrong to just simply apply it everywhere because it gets abused. And I also believe that there is now significant technology around us that allows for a reduction in accidents, and that's the route that we should be taking. So, no, I don't agree to 20 mile an hour blanket speed limits, but I think that they do have their time and their place around vulnerable people.
Andy, thank you. Dr. Andy Palmer, the former CEO of Aston Martin and COO of Nissan.
Fascinating conversation, and that sell to the public on net zero, I think, is a crucial part of our considerations this morning. Greg says the electric car will not drive 500 miles and charging takes far too long. There are these kind of arguments that always crop up whenever we have these conversations, but at the heart of today's is a political one about whether these targets need to be evolved, changed, removed in order to try to inspire change and indeed to give you more breathing space when it comes to the cost of living.
But how are you going to incentivise the infrastructure which solves Greg's problem about things like charging points or technology innovation in those areas if we are not, sorry to use this adjective, motoring towards EVs? Because as things get delayed, so do the other essential side products of EV vehicles that we need for the system to work well.
Exactly. Once again, it falls into under my umbrella of one of the main purposes of government has to be to make it easier for you and me to make the right decision. Or make a good decision. And the infrastructure point that you and Greg are making is exactly that. It has to be easier to say, oh, actually, I understand that an electric vehicle is better for the environment, it's cheaper for me to run. However, there is this hurdle in the way, and it is the charging thing. So give me more infrastructure, and it will make it easier for me to make the right decision.
And the cost of the car to start with.
Absolutely correct.